Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation at the Da Center for the Arts. Today is a celebration for me because I met Jill Stegall from Claremont Graduate University, and we are also here with my friend Atilio Pernisco. And we are also celebrating Atilio's work and Atilio's art in general. And I just want to thank Margaret, the director of the DA, and Allegra and Ethan, who are here with us. So I don't know if you want to introduce yourselves and then we can start talking.
Well, thank you for being here at this moment. Atilio Pernisco talking about Scramble, and we have a conversation today. So let's start it.
Yeah. So my name is Jill Stagle. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions at Claremont Graduate University, but I also am an MFA graduate of CGU, and that's how I became knowledgeable of Atilio's work and working with Margaret here. So I'm really excited to have the conversation with you. And I think before we even started, I was talking with you and Pablo about your title. Like, let's talk about Scramble, if we're going to just jump into the conversation.
Yeah, Scramble was a little bit of that very Latin American. In Argentina, we have a reference to Scramble, right?
Rebusque.
Rebusque, thank you. So rebusque comes back again and again when sometimes it leaves my imagination. But rebusque is a way of fixing something with a piece of something else, last minute things, kind of like what we did today, like we do like every day. In my work as well, I don't know exactly how it happens, what the fragments of randomness that sometimes. So Scramble was a good title or translation to that in English.
Yeah.
So
And rebusque also means a side job. So it's something you do to make it to the end of to the last day of the month, you know.
yeah, rebusque has many connotations.
Yeah.
Within, I always think that rebusque has a way of somehow, make that, but by any means, make that to the end of the month, or to make that thing work with anything you have in hand. It's a very third world concept, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't find an English translation for that. Seems it's like, in United States it was, but Scramble, I think it was pretty compatible to that, close enough. And it was kind of like that game of with words and with images. So yeah.
Well, I think it really goes well too with the paintings and the works themselves too. Like just talking about things being scrambled and how you kind of take stuff away on your painting. So maybe like a last minute thought, like working into the last day of the month. It's like, oh, you might not want that, so let's take it out and erase it.
And it was a scramble. I mean, it was a scramble because 2020, March 2020, and when I began painting smaller paintings, through the beginning of COVID, I didn't have enough materials. I didn't have canvases to work with. So it was a scramble. It was a kind of a rebusque type of situation. Later on in November of that year, 2020, Pablo came up with Margaret from the center. Both of them gave me the possibility of exhibiting, today, this November. So we had a year, a little bit less than a year to create the pieces, all the pieces that you see in the top and the bottom floor, except the smaller ones. So it is a scramble. It is like, if you talk about purity and or ideas of methodical work, all that is out the window when it comes to thinking that you have a date, right? A number, a day in the calendar, on the calendar, and then you have certain materials, sizes, a space to fill. So you have a logic to deal with, an equation.
And something that inspired me, the word itself, scramble, from a theoretical perspective, the fact that the word means both to solve a problem and to dismantle and to deconstruct. So I think that's also what he does in his paintings. At the same time, he is constructing through matter, through painting, through colors, and he's deconstructing narratives and ideas of what painting should be. And this is a question that I have for you in this connection between the materiality of the work itself and the vision that you have, the immaterial aspect of the work. How do you see this dialogue between the painting itself, the images, and the textures and the colors with the immaterial aspect, with the narratives and the worldview that you bring to the
That's
art?
good. I mean, that's a good question. I thought you were my friend. To ask this. No,
I can change. the
no,
question if you
no.
want.
I thought that was a good question. It is a good question. I mean, the immateriality and the materiality, the between the two. How do I work within those? 1 foot here, 1 foot there, right? Maybe the material are perhaps concepts of the mental image or ideas or remembrance, right? All these ideas, they're not, all these images, all these things are not tangible, and they become tangible when you are here now, right? In the painting, in the process of painting. So there are, it's a constant dance between the two. And then, I don't know exactly how one wins over the other. I don't know if I would like to have a lineage or a line, some kind of lineage between them to say something comes first and something second. But I do believe that maybe it's a circular thing, but I do feel that whether I have an image that I compose through photographs, and then in order to paint, to draw them and paint them, and then how will I paint them, right? And then while the creating the matter, right, moving the paint around, putting it's almost like creating a dialogue between a superposition of the paint and the material itself against the image that was intended, which was a mental image, which was the immateriality. Now the material is acting upon it. The material is the now. The material is the physical, is body. Yeah. So I mean, in performance, you probably have some of that. So is that? I mean, whether I'm sitting in that room or standing against a painting, all those things have probably to do with it, in some small or big percentage, right? So yeah, so I think that it's a dance between those two. The dance, the solution of that dance, I'm not sure what it is, but it is like a poetic element. Whether it's a narration of a story, in writing you have that, right? I mean, when you have a short story, a literature piece, or you have a poem, right? I mean, I think these are more poems in a sense. I don't know. What do you think?
I would love to hear you talk more about how it's a poem. I mean, we were talking before about titling the pieces and how you come up with the titles, and we already talked about Scramble. So if you see each of them as a poem, a lot of the paintings, if anybody's been able to look at them virtually, if they haven't been here physically, you have a lot going on in the images. You have a lot of stuff going on in the foreground, but you have a lot of stuff in the background happening with it. So I can definitely see how you see it as a poem in itself. What are you trying to get across to the viewer through the poems? Are you wanting them to understand the whole idea at once based off the title, or is it really not matter?
I think it's about sensibilities.
Yeah.
Like creating some kind of new way of sensing something. I think that's what a poem really does in the end. So I'm not sure exactly, in particular, I don't know if I know the answer to that, but I think in every painter probably is similar in some respect. And yeah, so yeah.
We writers have our ideal readers. Do you have your ideal viewer or your ideal experience that you would like to bring to the viewer?
Not necessarily. I mean, no. I mean, I would love. I mean, it's an act of love. Painting is an act of love. So, the 2-3 weeks ago, for the people that were not here, what is an act of love? What is an act of love too? That's another
Yeah.
question. What is love itself? I think it's a search. It's a never-ending search for or something, searching for something that is trying to find an answer to something that is a mysterious self. Once you define it, it's almost no longer there. It becomes kind of like the action of a relationship and love itself. I don't know if I'm going out of the.
So ideally you would like to perpetuate the question.
There is always more questions coming out of these pieces. you know.
I would definitely agree too, especially as an artist. Even if you have a plan for your painting or the piece you're making, I don't know how it is with writing, but you start a painting and you have an idea of what you want it to be, but it brings up more questions of, do you go with the plan or do you deviate from the plan and let the painting kind of do what it wants to do in the process? And I think that that's definitely something that you solved really well in the works that you have up on show too, is you have a lot of really good resolutions, or what I see as a resolution as a finished piece. But you have a lot of images too of folks where you can see the faces, and then in some of the pieces you can't see the faces, where they were omitted or kind of brushed off a little bit, where they're just blurred out. So I think I completely understand where a lot of times when you're painting, more questions come up, and as you're creating, more questions come up through making the artwork.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's a formal decision-making process. Whether you have images of a certain face or not, there is a moment that we'll have to decide what to erase and what to have more clarity on.
Yep.
What composition needs to be to have a more of a weight on one side, more on the other. What does it mean to do that? Playing with very basic composition and formal aspects of painting, I think is fun for me. So that's what moves me through it
Yeah.
as well.
Do you find it more difficult to work with faces that you have more emotional connection to, if it's a family member or friend, or does it not matter as much if you're going to erase it, or to how, like, the perfection element of it, of where you want it to be perfect?
Well, the idea of perfection and all those concepts, kind of are narrowing to an area I never want to be part of. The absoluteness or the perfection or the ideal. No, I'm always walking away. Erasure has to do a little bit with that. Some things that you kind of started looking like an apprentice painter is doing, and trying really hard to make it into a face or into a hand or into or shoulder, and yet it's probably better to erase that area, or it's probably better to erase another area, but to create some kind of contrast and elude my own. Sometimes it's perhaps my own idea of skills, of that. I think I'm also going into different places, but I wanted to say something else.
That's okay.
But going back to the issue of
You
Say
saved
something
me.
else. He's like, no, let's go back. And I was like, no, let's go there.
going back to the issue of erasure that we were talking
Erasure.
about. Erasure.
Right.
There is a lot of erasure, and at the same time, the paintings are screaming to us, I want to tell my story, because they are very autobiographical. So, do you really want us to know your story, or you don't want us to know your story?
The ideal idea is you. I want to know what you think. More than, I mean, I already done it. I already made the paintings. Already went through the process of choosing and evaluating, and even hating it to a point. there is a process of pain as well.
Yep.
I mean, I'm going back and forth, and then I will never come back to it because if I forget, you let me know. But you know, the idea of also the pain of painting is kind of like you know, so much work, and at the same time, it might not be, you know, it might not be worth it at the end. I mean, either it's not going to be a great piece, or so. I mean, there's a lot of considerations that I do on that. I'm never really quite sure. I mean, I start perhaps with maybe a solid idea. I don't want to say something. The last painting my daughter, for instance. Okay, I remember now. So the last painting my daughter and my mother, one of the last paintings, if you are here, it's kind of like a 6x7 piece. And yes, it has more affinity. I mean, I feel more at home painting people that I know.
Yeah.
They may not look completely like them, but it's kind of like the flesh that exactly that excuse that I need to keep going with the paint or start a painting. That visceral part. And
But I have to add maybe because I've known you for many years already, and I really admire Atilio's painting, Atilio's art in general, and more than the paintings themselves, what I admire is the evolution that I've seen throughout these last 10 years of the paintings that I saw, and even the paintings that I haven't seen from the last 20 years. The fact that, you know, generally a painter discovers a language and they stick to it for their whole life. And you discover a language, you work with it until you exhaust it, and then you move on to the next search. And that is what I admire the most. So if you could talk about this scrambling, this struggle that you go through maybe the last 30 or 20 years in finding a language and then let it go and then going into the search for the next language.
well, it's all in context, right? Because the second you have let's say if you have a gallery exhibit every 2 years that represents you, the equation will change, right? So in this case, you are repainting the same painting over and over and over again in order to make a case for yourself. The last straw, the last scream for help in a life. I mean, with all of us confronted at the end with death, of course. We're finite. We have finitude. So philosophy in painting, perhaps, no? But some of that, I mean, it's. I feel. I mean, I feel with all that kind of drama, right? Very much dramatic proposition or answer I gave you. But at the same time, the opposite. I'm very humoristic. I mean, the work has a humoristic side. I believe. I hope it comes across at some points, and some of these are harsh images, perhaps, or but they have a side to it that somehow they're comical.
Because you haven't been always a figurative painting. There is I've seen pieces that were 100% abstract. So maybe the question is, after this, do you see yourself looking for the next language, and what is that going to be like?
Yeah, I think yes. I think the paintings, coming back to that question though, the earlier work that I'd done through CGU, right after CGU, there were moments of my surrounding life, and there were drawings of that, and these ones were a little bit more image oriented, more compositions of many images, creating kind of like a collage of images, and I wanted to try this, and this was it throughout the COVID moment, right? maybe the idea of images comes from that screen, right? The screen, television screen, or computer screen. But for the future, I think looking at what I have done this year and a half, in the context that I did it, I want to do more quicker paintings, larger size, monochromatic, maybe sleeker finish. So I'm already give you a prescription of what it is, so you can do it at home. No, but some of that came from the monotypes downstairs. So the monotypes have that.
Yeah. When you say quicker, how long did it take for you generally to do one of the paintings, the larger paintings that you have up here? When you say quick, is it like a month or is it a week to finish it? Because it's, relative for every artist.
Yeah, no, it's probably like a good question in regards to the timing. Probably about half, one within the week and 3 weeks. So 2 weeks per painting. Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it's about.
Yeah.
I mean, you measure it. It's when it comes, it's just very basic.
You
It's
don't want to overthink it. Just get it done.
canvas, right? Painting canvas.
Yeah.
Period. With the lowest the most economical way, which is brush and paint. Regarding the painting of the future, maybe that is the future. Kind of going back to getting away from the virtual world or the cloud into a more perceptive, more materially oriented, phenomenological aspect of acting and accessing to that. What the material can do, the tactile part, and that I think that's very human.
Yeah.
Very pro, right? I don't know what will you call it? I don't know.
And let me ask you a question, as as Atilio's ideal viewer, how was your experience of looking at the paintings?
Well, viewing art is always better, in my opinion, in person versus the first time I saw this work was, on the images that Margaret sent me and through the catalog. And it's definitely a completely different experience when you're viewing them in person because of the scale. The scale is always different when you have it be a larger than life kind of painting. But it felt very like you were saying, like I couldn't put it into words, but more like a dream, or not necessarily a fantasy world, but it's more like if you were asleep and having a pleasant dream, just the way that the paintings were with the colors and the people and the scenes. It just was very, I don't know, it was very peaceful to kind of look at it. Like I felt like I could just kind of sit and view the paintings for quite some time, that there was a lot to see and kind of read in it. Like you were talking earlier about the paintings being a poem. I'm not a poet and I know it, so I'm just like, it's nice to take the time to actually see what you're trying to tell me through the paintings, but to also see all the details and the areas where you don't have too much painterly marks in it, where we talked before where it's more abstracted and you can kind of look closer and see what it really is. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned the peacefulness, because and this is something we touch upon on the catalog. There is this spectrum of approaches, because some paintings are peaceful and they seem dreamlike and they're beautiful, and some paintings they seem taken from a gothic horror movie.
Yeah, some of them definitely look a little bit more violent the more you look at it.
Yeah.
But even the way that they're made, it's a peaceful violence. If that's possible.
It's a peaceful horror.
Exactly,
yes.
Right?
Well, it depends on how. I think that's also true. I mean, like, one maybe it's a gore image or more, that maybe by the way it's painted, you can somehow romanticize it a little bit. You can make it more attractive, right, to the viewer. And sometimes I'm aware of those things, of course. Not that I care for 100%. Do you know what I mean, right?
I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
Well, being an artist is kind of like, you are in your own bubble, in your own room, your own studio. And at one point, like the COVID was pretty interesting, right? And that it's almost like not only through media, right, the universal view of it, but also how you or how I personally felt. Like say, maybe if I die tomorrow, well, then this is it.
Yeah.
I'm doing these pieces. So it's an act of love. It is an act of love. I think Pablo just wrote a little bit about that, especially in the back of the catalog. Is there saying something, trying to survive.
Yeah.
If you allow me, maybe I can plug the
Yeah.
catalog
Yes.
for the viewers.
Yes, the catalog.
Thank you.
Of course.
And this is the catalog that comes with kind of like a theoretical framework to support Atilio's painting, and also with the, I think, very lively interview. No?
That was very nice. Yeah, very nice.
And I have just one question for you. The where is it? The essay that opens the catalog ends with this sentence. Let me see if I find it. Well, something to the effect that your paintings, they aspire secretly to abstraction. No, if you can talk about that, what does that mean to you, and if it's true or it's just my imagination?
I think abstraction. I mean, I think it's either everything is an abstract somehow. Painting, everything is somehow a removal from the original, somewhat abstract, or is everything representational? Even a blue title called Blue has a significant amount of meaning by itself, right? So both of those are still echoing each other. They're coexisting. Whether we want to paint an arm or not, we're still, trying to evoke something else. I mean, the idea of, we're not trying to answer questions. We're probably producing more. True. For me, especially, perhaps for you, as an abstract painter, we're trying to produce different emotions somehow that start with ourselves creating that piece, or and it's not really completely defined. It's not defined until the end. Could be completely horrible at the end. You can erase it at the end if you want, throw it away, or it could be the greatest piece that you ever done, right? Which is not true, because you always want to have a next piece, right? So,
If you're alive.
I was about to say, unless you die. That's what I was thinking, the same thing. I know.
I don't like that.
Well, I think, and we talked about this briefly before too, and I know you don't want this question, but the more we talk about this body of work specifically, what were your influences, or just an influence while you were making this work, whether it was an artistic influence or an outside influence, if it was COVID that kind of influenced kind of the imagery and what you were putting into these pieces and the poems that you were making?
Good question. I think it was a little bit of all of that, because I mean, really, I wasn't measuring myself. The beginning pieces, there were the smaller pieces that are not actually at the show. Maybe there are only 2 or 3 at the beginning of the show. You see 3 of those done in 2020, but the rest, they were just came out from that equation of this date to this exhibit to a little larger paintings. I think everything had to do with it. I mean, I couldn't find myself the space to paint. So COVID kind of created a good place, a safe place. COVID is good, actually. I mean, I'm so sorry, and I had some family member that died from COVID, but I'm saying it has a concept in general form. We cannot stop this natural evolution, but I do find that that for me it was a good place for me to break from the system, kind of walking away from the grid.
Yep.
And a lot of people did that, not just me. A lot of artists and a lot of people. And I think it's kind of like this little cultural revolution. I think COVID, maybe not today, maybe is in the making. But the second we have, I don't know, another long holiday, and when we come back to work, we realize that what did normal wanted from us? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't want to go back to normal, whatever that was before COVID.
No,
Everyone goes, I want everything to be back to normal. And I was like, I don't want it to be like it was before.
No.
Back to normal or back to work in general?
Oh, I've been back to work. Both.
And talking about work, because Atilio is not only a painter, he's also an educator. He's a teacher of art. So maybe moving away from your art and into your discipline as a teacher, what is it that you want your students to get from you? Since we are getting this zoom out perspective of what happens after we die, what is it that you want your students to say, hey, this is what I learned from Atilio?
No, I want to be sitting down with them eye level. And I want to hear what they want to say, they have to say. I want to hear them. They are the future. There's nothing they have from me to learn from.
Because I've seen you interacting with your students, and
Yeah.
it's something really to behold. It's the relationship you have with them, and the fraternal connection that he has with his students. I think it's really
It is
remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's I think the mechanical teaching part, like some mechanical teachers, or they belong to this bigger, the institution, the ideology of the saying, the absolute. We know what we know. This is a future. This is how you should think. Well, just look at what world we left for them to live. Nothing, right? It's important to be realistic about that and say, we cannot teach you anything.
And that's the other thing. You, children in general, have a huge. They occupy a huge space in your imagination.
Yeah, yeah. The more children, that's more autoreferential in a sense. But there's a lot of storytelling. I mean, especially, Cortázar, Argentine writer, short stories, concentrates on that adolescence or pre-adolescence years, which is fascinating because for me, and I found a place in common with that, to tell a story, psychological wounds, be able to bring that out, teaching of the same age, a lot of things they co-inform. So no, it's fascinating, and yeah, we're gonna have a great future ahead through their hands, through their minds, through their paintings, not ours. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any more questions for him, or do you want to open it up to our folks that we have with us?
Oh, that
too?
would be great. That's a
I
great
think
idea.
that would be great if we
That's a
have any
great idea.
questions from viewers or anyone in the audience for Atilio. Definitely, we'd be happy to facilitate that. Yeah.
Sanook.
Yeah. How are you?
How are you, Sanook? How are you?
Very, very good. I've always wanted to ask you what questions you get the most from your student who's learning painting from you. What do you think about when you paint?
Oh, that's a hard one. I'm happy I don't have to answer.
I don't. I don't know if I have that question being asked. That question was asked by the students, but I did ask that question to the students as a group. So what do we think when we paint?
Okay.
And truly, we are not thinking of painting.
Mm.
We're not thinking of whether the brush stroke, the white and the ochre.
Mm-hmm.
That's very traditional painting.
Mhm.
Painting
It
that,
is.
but cadmium red.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
we are always thinking about something else,
Mhm.
right? Kind of like the idea of consuming the present, but while we are thinking about the future,
Mhm.
it's always a consideration, a Heideggerian right concept.
Mhm.
But I do believe that maybe that's irrationality of function.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, as you know, we're both teachers, and we've taught for a long time. And your paintings are very disciplined heavy. You know, you can't. One of the biggest reasons I admire so much is because you can't paint. You can find painters who like you
Mhm.
anymore. You know, you have a very strong foundation, and you've spent so much time training yourself to be able to paint like that. And a lot of your students, and a lot of mine, really, in my case, it'd be typography class.
Mhm.
But in your case, it'd be basic painting skill class, and hard to discipline students to have a discipline you have. So my questions are more geared towards that. And how do you feel when you have that much discipline? And you know, I would feel, if I were your student, I would like to ask you that question. Because I'd like to do what you do without working that hard.
Yeah.
You see?
No, that's a really good question, so Sanuk. I mean, maybe that changed my career. I'm gonna quit teaching. Actually, I usually teach when I teach my painting classes are very conceptual based, so they're not. I'm just coming from, kind of like a particular order system. Kind of like, what do you want to do? What do you want to paint? And then I'll go individually with them, and then we have a group crit. Especially the painting class I teach at LACSA, the High School of the Arts, which is a great institution, and amazing students at any, I mean, at the level of any university or college. So I do kind of bring that up. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I will think about that. Okay, I will think about every time I teach, whether if I want to, incorporate what my experience was 100%, or just a teaching method that maybe is more relevant to conceptual, or like more into the mind, or I really care more about from our students, right? And they all kind of know this, the idea of I don't know exactly. I mean, I think technique will help us to convey our goals better, our ideas, but you need to have something underneath it. Okay, there's nothing, and some people may have just very good ideas and concepts, and they don't have any visual solution to hold it, to create it. That might be also a problem, right? But it's a very like in, independent base, but very, like at the end it's a very communal kind of a class. We learn from each other. And, I mean, I don't know. I don't even give grades. I don't actually believe in grades. And it's a high school.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions too?
Maybe yes.
Well, I'm curious because earlier on there was a discussion about finding different languages
Yeah,
that you're going. Is it necessary to change the language?
that's a good question. Is it necessary to change It's like what Pablo was saying before, you know, you master a language and then you go on to another language and master it. Is it necessary for you to change those languages? Or have you ever considered staying with the same language, maybe doing something different with that language? Is that what you're asking, kind of?
In a sense, but you put in a word that I kind of take, I kind of sets off a thing in my head.
Oh, no.
About mastering it.
Yeah.
Okay, is, does one ever master it?
That's good.
And, I mean, I think of a painter like Ed Moses, okay, who, his whole career was abstract painting, right? I mean, he was painting in a wheelchair right to the day that he died.
Yeah.
And that was his language. So he didn't find it necessary to change the language. He might have found it necessary to vary the vocabulary, but the language itself stayed constant.
Yep.
And that's something I always admired him in. I think he's underrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, anyhow.
Before Atilio answers, if I might just clarify something, because I have the feeling that I misspoke. I didn't mean to say that he mastered the language or that he went from language to language. I meant to say that he has findings throughout his career, ways of expressing that any other artist would have stayed and stick with that. And he doesn't. He just moves on and looks for the next finding. No, I'm not talking about language or visual language or way of expressing. I'm just talking about findings, what we call in Spanish hallazgos. You know? That's what I was talking about. I don't know if that's the line of thinking you are also going through, or
I was just picking up on what had been said, and then also thinking back, I was at not the second Saturday opening, but the first opening, you know, and I was looking at the painting over here, it's right behind this wall, I guess.
Oh, the last one.
And then towards the end of the evening, I had the opportunity of walking around with you and Angelique and her husband Robert, and you were talking about, when you talked about that painting, okay, it brought a very different meaning to me, because first off, I'm not fluent in Spanish, and the title is in Spanish, right? And then you talked about the imagery in there, and I started understanding what, I mean, if you had titled it, I'm not saying this is a fault, you know, La Familia or something like that, that would have opened a door for me. But when you talked about, you know, that these were military policemen over here, and that this woman in the hoodie sweatshirt and the roller skates was your mother.
You're right.
Okay, and this was your daughter over here, but behind
Yeah.
was and I remember this, it was the boyfriend who had jilted her or whatever, and she was hugging a grave marker, you know. That brought a whole new meaning to the painting, and so that's...
You were in love with the painting first, and then you fell out of love when you learned the meaning of it, just like love.
No, I didn't fall out of love with that.
Just like
love itself. I mean, after a while, there's nothing to conquer. So
you want to perpetuate the question, not give the
no,
answer.
I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful. I mean, I'm listening to you. That was a very personal painting, actually, and
I can imagine.
I explained it that way to a very intimate group that night. So, and I usually don't like, especially that's why I don't like giving you the explanation of each painting, because actually there is no really acute explanation for each painting. But from what I started, basically it's easy to explain. But I don't even want to give you that information, because then it will kill the romance for it, your own drive for getting more information, accessing to more information for yourself. So I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. Yeah, as an artist, I can understand where you want the viewer to have their own connection and emotional connection with the work and not give them too much. Like you leave breadcrumbs, but you leave just enough where they kind of understand it. But if
Yeah.
you give them too much, then it's like they're in your head too much and they understand your complete intention with the work.
Yes.
Yep.
And
I mean,
also,
it's not a trick. It's not a trick that we have to, measure ourselves to not tell you something or to keep things away from you, but we also are learning in the feedback with the feedback.
no, I was going to say also what we called in academia. I'm sorry for bringing an academic concept, but what they call the intentional fallacy is you do know that the idea that the author or the painter has the last answer about his own work, and that is a fallacy. He might know that that was his mother and that is his kid, but that doesn't mean that exhausts the concept and all of the possible ideas and imaginations that the painting can bring to you. So that's just one dimension that does not exhaust the painting. I would say the opposite. He might have no idea, and particularly because of his paintings are so great and have so many dimensions, he's probably the last person you want to ask.
Well, I know I didn't ask the question when we were walking, I was kind of standing there
Yeah.
listening. But it did allow me entrance into the painting that I didn't have before.
But it's an entrance
And-
into the anecdotal dimension of the painting, not into the painting itself.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get into his brain,
Yeah.
but into the painting.
No.
No, you don't want to either. No,
That's a dark place.
Oh, no.
no, you probably know me already. Thank you.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Is there time for another question?
Of course there is.
of course.
Yes.
All right. Well, how long has it been? It's been many years. You've shown at my gallery with a very talented Cuban artist who did abstract painting, and at that time you painted very realistic. Your paintings are much more defined, and it was almost illustrative. But I had a pleasure of seeing your painting since we lived there for almost 2 months, and each night it would talk to me. It would have a very intense dialogue inside paintings. And I've always wondered, and I don't think the representation has changed, but the dialogue is still here in your paintings. And I'd love to hear something from you, what kind of dialogues you have, because it's so obvious that your paintings are designed. I could really see the process. This is, as a designer, I relate to your process. But it seems like because your process is longer, because you have a brush and a canvas and you can change stuff, you can move things around on your own. You are the director of your own work, and I'd love to hear from you what some of the dialogues that you have with your painting.
It's always a dialogue. I mean, it's a dialogue to the last painting. It's a dialogue to the last mark. It's a dialogue to a composite of paintings. So it's not just one thing. It's never. It's not linear. I mean, we do it linearly because of the time we have, and you put it in a calendar what we did that day. But you can erase. The erasure is so important because you can erase the calendar. The erasure is more important than the mark making. It's more telling. It's more poetic than the mark making. I didn't answer your question, but I would say, but no.
That's definitely part of the dialogue, though, you have with the work is you make the marks, and then you look at it, and then you erase some of it. That in itself is a dialogue with the painting because you're choosing to omit something that was once there that we as the viewer will never see as being there because you took it away.
Right.
So that is a dialogue. So you did answer the question.
It is. Well, thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
He was just erasing himself.
Exactly.
I want to erase myself. It is actually after the show, and I will always say, I went to a wake to a good to a family member not too long ago, and then it was I went to this place, which is the opening of our exhibit, my exhibit, our exhibit, an act of love, and I see a lot of people coming that night. I remember only 2 weeks ago, I felt it was an act of love. And too much information will destroy that for sure. But thank you for being here tonight. If you have any more questions, to all of you that are here, thank you for helping us. And I mean, if you have any other questions, please do.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a great place to wrap up the formal conversation. If you're watching online, we're here until 6. Come on down to the DAW Center. But we have refreshments, light refreshments. Definitely come up to Atilio and Pablo, ask any other questions that you have. But thank you so much for joining.
And
Thank you so much for
maybe
having
people
me.
who are online have questions.
Do we have any questions online?
Well, if they want to, they can ask questions too.
But while we wait, I just want to say it was an act of love. And what does that mean, right? The search for that never-ending thing that may keep us alive.
Yeah.
The second we know that we're mortals, that need will go away. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
You totally answered that last